Hey everyone, I'm finally back to regularly scheduled programming, I think. There's a there's a lot left in my rewrite and I'm really glad everyone's enjoying it so far. But no one's infallible and there are always a few flaws in every story or plots that have been forgotten or redirected in weird ways. I do ask that you point these out wherever possible. I'd like to do a grand conclusion after everything's said and done, where I talk about all the points of the plot at the end of the rewrite and explain my reasoning for how I came up with some of the bits. So, the more flaws or plot holes that there are, the more I'll have to talk about and the more I'll have for self improvement. Even those in my audience that staunchly dislike Daigo Knight will still admit that at times he does do something amazing. And I haven't had very many complaints about my own rewrite, and I've been extremely fortunate in that way. But when I hear of the other rewrite channels pulling out a banger episode, it really drives up my incentive to do well, even though I'm not really in competition with the others. In terms of awesomeness, my last episode was 1 hour 15 minutes. I remarked that the episodes were getting too long and therefore too hard to edit in the time frame I had been giving myself. Well, maybe I'm not disciplined enough, but I really can't stifle an episode for such a reason. It was probably my mood affected by life, but I really didn't feel that great about last episode. But no one in the comments had any beef with it. Some even thought it was one of my best. So I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants, and whatever length ends up being will be. And if an episode ends up being too long, I'll just delay the release by a day or two so everybody can get the full-fledged movie. Last time, we covered a bunch of Shikamaru's dealings. He followed around and got caught by Sakura before having an intense yet ambiguous conversation with her. In the remainder of his flashback, he was being urged to push on to the Jonin rank, not before engaging in battle-oriented missions to round himself out. So he was sent to the tiny land of Sound, who had been harassing all the neighboring nations since claiming their ground with the intent of weakening them or even routing them from their base of operations. Shikamaru beheld a disturbing sight as he fled after his team got into a scuffle with the Sound Shinobi. Meanwhile, at home, we got yet another disturbing sequence with Minato. This has probably become my favorite part of the time skip arc, because boy oh boy, theories fly when it comes to what's happening to Minato. And I will say that in the past, with some of the mysteries that I've pushed out, a lot of the theories have been right. Who was the second Jinchuriki? In that case, there were only so many guesses available, so one of them had to be right. However, the reasoning given in some of the theories were nearly right on the money as to why I chose that second Jinchuriki. And theories are by far my favorite parts of doing the rewrite. Because even the false ones project an alternate timeline for where the rewrite could have gone. And it really energizes the creative center of my brain for other possibilities in the future as well as for other rewrites that I'll inevitably end up doing. Most prominently, I've thought about doing a close to canon rewrite similar to Daigo's, but I've gotten requests for rewrites to Bleach and One Piece as well. Also, as an aside, 90% of my viewers are between the ages of 18 and 34. Which I gotta say is pretty relaxing. Because I'm talking Naruto, I thought my viewer base would be younger, and the younger folks tend to have loud suggestions, if you get my drift. The more mature audience understands that a story doesn't have to explode with absolute gut-busting energy in every single episode. And I understand that the way I've been doing the rewrite has a lot less attention to the combat. I'm more interested in the intrigue that happens between the fighting, and I'm glad that my audience tends to think the same way. Though when those fights happen, I definitely try to keep them interesting. One of my all-time complaints about the action genre across the world is that certain things are blown way out of proportion. Like when a main character's friend falls in a fight, and the main character, for some reason, has the time to hold them in their arms and cry as they say their last words. Talk to anybody who's seen action in the military, or any historian speaking on all the world's previous wars, or anybody who's been to a first world country and sees death constantly happening. This delayed death thing never happens. And so to dramatize it in fiction is fine every now and again, but the more realistic crafting of death is for it to be instant and jarring and horrible. Kushina and Minato taking that claw stab from the fox in canon is cool and all, but he got them in the chest. That means no more lungs to breathe or heart to pump blood, but they're still talking to baby Naruto for a few minutes. I just don't like stuff like that. But that's just an example of many other writing stereotypes that I dislike. And a reason why having a more mature audience is beneficial, because no one would call BS if I killed a character off in an instantaneous way like that. And again, to dramatize it sometimes is fine. I'm talking more specifically to not do it every single time. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe because today's episode is just the tip of the iceberg. If you have any crazy theories, please share them below because we're going to be learning a whole lot today. But enough of my inane ranting, let's get into today's episode. Day 4. Despite not gaining back all of his weight yet, Choji had been recognized already by Kakashi as being significantly stronger than what he was before he was kidnapped. In their journey to retrieve Hinata, Choji had showed himself capable of keeping up with Kakashi's fast pace. This compared to Neji, the top of their class, and Ino, a Jinchuriki. He showed no indication of fatigue as they traveled, and remained able to keep up with Kakashi every step of the way. This alone was enough for Kakashi to recommend Choji for a shinobi task within the walls. So he'd been given a job alongside Inoichi to help guard the jails. Today was his first day, but he had several hours before starting and decided to do some relaxing cloud spotting with Shikamaru. They both lay silently on their backs as they look up at the big puffy clouds overhead. Occasionally, one of them would point at a cloud with a distinct shape and see if they both had the same idea of what it looked like. Choji found himself laughing uncontrollably at some of Shikamaru's ridiculous guesses delivered in a deadpan seriousness. It was in these moments in particular that Choji was able to actually fully relax. The information that he willfully shared with the Hokage upon his return to the village was crucial to how the village, nay, the allied nations, would deal with the Land of Rain going forward. That the Akatsuki were so confident that Choji somehow escaped that nation with such damning information. But every time he thought of any of this, he also thought of her, and it would sink him to a darkness that few could pull him from. As the two laughed at each other's suggestions, they were greeted by a third who was in no mood to goof around. Sitting up, Shikamaru and Choji waved greeting to Shino. They invited him to look at clouds with them, but he had zero interest. "There's something that we need your help with," Shino said, head slightly shifting left and right as if he was expecting others to be present. "Somewhere more private." "For a mission?" Shikamaru asked, because why else would they need to go somewhere private for it? No, not really," Shino answered uncertainly. Exchanging glances with Choji, Shikamaru wondered where they could go for this absolute privacy anyway. Ultimately, Shino led them to the outskirts of town as a web of bugs spread out around them to keep watch for any who would come too close. "Kiba has come across a worrying plot," Shino started. "He first told Neji, who did his own investigation. Then they told me, and I continued the investigation." "And?" Choji asked, waiting to hear the results. "I'd hate to fall victim to paranoia, but it appears that some of our classmates are scheming together." Shino looked past them toward the heart of the village. "To kill the Hokage." "What?" Choji and Shikamaru said in unison. For Choji, the first obvious question was, why would any of their classmates want to kill the only Hokage they've ever had? The worrying issue for me is that there is a non-zero chance that this could be real, and we haven't been able to find conclusive proof, Shino elaborated. After all our individual time away from the village, it's very possible that at least one of us was indoctrinated against the village. And who's supposedly a part of this plot? Shikamaru asked with a raised eyebrow. As much as Choji was doubtful about this, he was sure Shikamaru had already run through a bunch of scenarios to further debunk the rumor. We know absolutely that Naruto and Sasuke are involved. Kiba also claims to have overheard Sakura, Hinata, and Ino, but he's unsure given the circumstances he was in at the time. Shino goes on. Kiba didn't distinctly see anyone, and he has remarked already that everyone smells a little bit different from when he last saw them. However, Kiba trusts his sense of smell beyond anything else in the world, and swears up and down at what he overheard. Why didn't any of you just go and ask them? Choji asked, to shockingly serious looks from the other two. If they are planning something, a direct approach would just make them more guarded, Shino explained. And if they aren't, Shikamaru continued, then we could be creating needless tension between our class and squad mates. Neji could get in trouble for falsely accusing Hinata, the heir to one of the most powerful clans, of treason, Shino reasoned. And who knows how unstable Naruto is? I've nothing against Ino, obviously, but the beast within could take advantage of a frustration from her if she's agitated by the wrong news, Shikamaru added. Choji was kind of confused and pretty shocked that neither Shikamaru nor Shino seemed to have any residual trust for their classmates. This time away has shattered more than just their childhood. Their trust in one another was shattering off a simple rumor. Sasuke is the last of his clan within the village. To suggest that he too has turned coat would be to absolutely undo another powerful clan from existence, Shino concluded. Naruto's the son of the Hokage. Everyone is extremely dangerous to expose without risking further consequences for being wrong. Well, except Sakura, but she's so closely knit with Naruto these days that there's bound to be collateral damage there, too, Shikamaru says, sighing about the difficulty of approaching the situation. Eyes narrowing, Choji's annoyed that they think so little of their friends that they can't simply ask for clarification. Shino asks for their discretion with sharing this information to others and requests their aid in solving the dilemma. In the best case scenario, they've all become a little paranoid and Kiba didn't hear things right. In the worst case scenario, this is real, and spreading this information around to the wrong people could be devastating and lead to a civil war. Shino remarks that in Konoha's history, there always seems to be a war within every few years, and he would like for that to stop happening. Later, taking his time to head to the jails since he's still ahead of schedule, Choji wonders what the harm is in asking one of the suspects about it. If he doesn't reveal any names, he'll at the very least just make a fool out of himself. And that much he could handle. Knowing that the others didn't really do much these days, finishing their D and C rank missions in record time, Choji knows exactly where to go to find Ino. She tends to wander around with Sakura, help her mom around the shop, or spend time alone in the training grounds. He knows she's not training in the conventional sense. The difference in her outward personality had changed radically after she returned from her time away. He figured this was due to her figuring out the troubles with her tailed beast. Though he had never seen Naruto truly lose it, like he had with Ino, he always imagined Ino's beast was at the very least a little bit friendlier than the fox. Maybe she had somehow tamed it. Like him, she was open with some things from her time away and pretty private about other things. He lucked out today and found her in the flower shop on his first stop to look for her. She lit up when she saw him and invited him over to the counter to chat with her. It was a pretty quiet day, so there wasn't much for customers, and she had been getting pretty bored. This is actually a really good time to ask this, Choji says, looking at the vacant open doors of the shop. What's that? Ino asks. I guess I haven't been paying very much attention, Choji began, pausing for a moment to collect his thoughts. But I've heard a really weird rumor, and I need to know if it's true. Color me intrigued, Choji. What's the rumor? Ino asks nonchalantly. Well, it's that you and a few others are planning to... off the Hokage, Choji explains flatly. The surprise is obvious upon Ino's face, but she still doesn't skip a beat in responding. Assassinating the Hokage? What a rumor! Who would spread that about little old me? I'm not sure who started it, but apparently it's gaining traction. I'm not even sure who's all involved, and I know it sounds absolutely wild, since I can't picture you doing something like this. I just needed to ask you directly and make sure. We're in times of peace for once, Ino explains, and I think when you're at war for decades, and that all goes away, people get bored. I think they're willing to talk about anything to stir up these crazy machinations. But is it true? Are you involved in something like that? I need a yes or a no, Choji answers, worry building within. Look, Choji, Ino hesitates. I don't know where this rumor came from, but it's not something I can exactly discuss right now. Looking around the still empty flower shop, Choji frowns. What do you mean? If it's not true, then why not just say so? What is there to hide? Can't you just trust in me? Ino asks, frowning as well. Trust? Choji asks, hurt by the implication that she can't simply deny it. I've always been there for you. I've always been here for you. I thought you'd trust me enough to be honest. You're like a different person. Maybe it's not about trust then, Ino answers defensively, a nerve struck by the suggestion that she was a different person. I'm not trying to keep any secrets from you. There's just a lot of complications with everyone back in the village now. You're definitely keeping secrets from me, Choji replied angrily. If you can't tell me of all people, then I don't know where we stand anymore. I'm not trying to confuse you, Ino sighs. It's just how things are right now. I'm waiting for everything to settle in before I blab all of my deepest, darkest secrets to everyone. Shaking his head, Choji answers, I only expect honesty. After all these years of training to help contain the beast inside of you, this is the best you can give me? It's complicated, Ino murmurs, distressed by his heating attitude. Well, this is just great, Choji fumes, turning away from Ino and heading for the exit. You realize that if you've failed to convince me, I have no choice but to tell the Hokage, right? Choji, please, just trust me, Ino mutters again, tearing a little at his frustrations. Snarling, Choji exits the shop and stomps down the street. This was unbelievable! If she really wasn't planning anything, she would have just easily said no. What does this mean then? If she can't give him a straight answer, could he actually turn her into the Hokage, though? She easily abandoned her trust in him, but could he do the same to her? This kind of thing wasn't so easy for Choji, to forget his closest confidants. He knew she had spent significant time in the Land of Wind with the Sand Shinobi, but he also didn't know very much about them. Perhaps they taught her to distrust people she'd known since before she could walk. Because this was definitely not who Ino was. Almost forgetting his job at the jails, Choji realizes that he now has to go work for Ino's father. Should he tell him? What were the implications if he told him? Inoichi was very much a subordinate for the Hokage. Would he voluntarily lock his own daughter up for treason? Choji's heart wrenched at the idea of betraying his friend, even if they did it first. Nervously, Choji walked towards the jails, unsure of what to do with this newfound information. At the very least, Shikamaru and the others needed to know, but he wouldn't be able to tell them until after work. Upon arrival, Choji is greeted by Inoichi, who is waiting for him outside. Due to the new security restrictions, no one but employees at the jail are allowed to come and go at will. And the Hokage has already approved Choji for the position to help Inoichi out. The previous jail guards were not ninja, since the village were far too few in number to employ them for such menial tasks. But since the Triumphant 12 were being restrained from more difficult missions at the moment, small jobs like this could double as D-rank missions to increase their success rates over a shorter period of time. And it really was a D-rank mission. In Inoichi's time as the warden over the last 4 years, there had only been 2 troubling incidents that he was alone capable of solving. Choji just had to make sure that they were fed on time and bar anyone from entry. There weren't even very many long-term prisoners apparently, so that wasn't something that was troubling to deal with either. 90% of his time would be patrolling between the front door and the door that leads to the cell block. The other 10% would be various small tasks to help Inoichi with his various paperwork, as well as the aforementioned feeding of the present prisoners. Left to his own devices now, Choji entered the cell block to familiarize himself with the layout. He had never really had any reason to come here as a kid, so it was a pretty new experience for him. Some cells were jail cells, while others were iron doors blocking the view of their denizens. Inoichi had used a flag system to denote which cells were currently occupied, so that Choji could ignore the others. Choji was given the special privilege that he could speak with the prisoners, but Inoichi cautioned that he doesn't abuse this privilege. Currently, there were just 4 prisoners. 2 of them were in a cell together. This cell was for rowdy villagers who needed a place to calm down. Whether they were drunk or got into a fight or some such, this is where they ended up. Considering it was the middle of the day, Choji hoped that it wasn't because they were drunk. Even Inoichi was impressed by how well behaved the village was this week. He usually had a dozen or more in that cell at all times, and as non-threatening as they were, it was often them that were the biggest troublemakers. The more long-term prisoners were quiet and never said anything or did anything to cause problems. Looking around the room, it was difficult not to spot Danzo sitting silently in his cramped and exposed cell. Choji only knew him from the history books of Konoha. He was trained alongside the 3rd Hokage, but for reasons unknown steered life towards one of darkness. At least, that was as much as Choji could remember. Other than being a literal figure from the history books, Choji had no real interest in speaking to him. The final occupied cell was the iron door type. It had a slider at nearly eye level that Choji could open and peer into to see the prisoner within. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the room's floor was Rock Lee, eyes closed in meditation. Mouth falling agape, Choji wondered why Lee was in a place like this. Psst! Choji hissed at Lee to get his attention. Eyes opening, Lee looked up at Choji, and his lips curled slightly upward in a small smile. "It is good to see you, Choji." "What are you doing here?" Choji whispered, confused. "There's a dark cloud over Konoha, Choji," Lee told him. Unlike Choji, Lee did not lower his voice even a little. "If someone doesn't pierce these clouds with a ray of light soon, then the darkness will eat everyone up and leave a shell of Konoha's former glory." "What are you talking about, Lee?" Choji asked, confused by the metaphor. "The Hokage has clearly gone insane," Lee answered, eyes closing slowly and opening just as deliberately. You're in a jail, you wouldn't even know," Choji mutters in distress. Without another word to Lee, he snaps the metal slider shut and backs away from the door, head swiveling to Danzo. Was the old man still somehow corrupting others? What if Ino thought this way as well? Why are people thinking that the Hokage's insane? Or worse yet, worth killing? Swallowing hard, Choji returns to the front, where Inoichi is taking a break outside. He uncharacteristically apologizes to Inoichi for abandoning his job day 1 before dashing back to the village with his proof. After Choji escaped enslavement, he discovered that it was nearly impossible to find his direction. Nearly every single method of finding north relied on the sky, but here it was cloudy year-round, if not straight up raining constantly. Therefore, none of the tricks Choji could recall would work. This meant that he wandered aimlessly. He attempted straight paths, but with the rain washing all tracks and marks away, it was difficult for him to discern where he had already been. Before long, he found himself at the outskirts of another settlement, and upon cursory scouting discovered that it too was in the total control of the same violent oppressors. Was it possible that the entire populace of this nation were being forced to hard labor? Choji understood that the Land of Rain was quite small, but even after traveling for a few weeks he found himself still trapped in the country. He wondered if there was some trick to traversing these wilds or if he was actually being that careless. He also wondered if it was possible that he was doing this to himself. There was clear regret in leaving all the slaves behind and allowing them to suffer in their fates. Perhaps he was subconsciously turning himself around to give himself an excuse to help the ones that he could, especially after coming to know so many of them and how even minor injuries likely led to their executions. One night, while he camped and attempted to start a fire despite the rain, he was set upon by a group of oppressors. Their weapons and fighting style were extremely familiar to him already, but Choji was still malnourished and very outnumbered. Though he was able to manage expansion jutsu into his arms and hands, it quickly ended and he failed to take out more than one in that burst. Without any proper weapons, there was only so much he could do to fend off their simultaneous attacks. Eventually, he's caught from behind and smashed into the ground. He must have been near a village. Why else would the oppressors be randomly wandering woods like this? "This one has a will to fight," one of the oppressors points out. "That makes for a great slave." Growling that he might end up thrown into the system of enslavement all over again, Choji curses his weak body. As the oppressors speak between each other, one of them falls limp to the ground beside Choji. Standing above the body, a young girl of perhaps 10 years old stood with a metal cudgel in her hand. Releasing Choji in their rage, the oppressors attempt to apprehend the girl before they're jumped on all sides by a flurry of people. From Choji's compromised position, he could only see 4 or 5 come to his aid before all the oppressors were felled. Pulling him to his feet, a man in a metal mask pats Choji's shoulders and confirms that he's okay. Kneeling beside him, the man reassures Choji that he's safe now. Now fully cognizant of who's surrounding him, Choji beholds more than a dozen kids ranging from 9 years old to 15, along with the single adult that helped him to his feet. "What's your name, boy?" the man in the mask asks, stepping away from him. "Choji," he answered honestly. Withholding his family name and hiding his forehead protector was standard fare for Choji at this point. "I am Hanzo, and these that you see before you are all that I have rescued from the enslavement camps," the man explained, recognizing Choji's shock at learning his name. "I go about things differently than you might think. Pain rules his people through psychological torture. Because it is not I who is assaulting his settlements, he's sending these attacks against his own land under the guise that it's me." "What?" Choji asks understandably. "Master Hanzo is the savior we all needed," one of the kids asserts. Other than his metal mask, Hanzo has a mane of blonde hair stretching out behind him. He also wears a cloak to protect him from the rain, as do all of the children around him. "I train those who I free so that they can go out and mount individual assaults to free even more from enslavement," Hanzo explains, extending a hand to invite Choji to join him. Whether this was divine intervention or Hanzo could read minds, he was advertising to Choji exactly what Choji wanted to do. Konoha was fine being down just a single ninja. He could afford to take some time and help this rebellious group save as many people as possible. But it was a gamble. It was very possible that every word out of Hanzo's mouth was a lie. Choji knew the history. Hanzo is the one who stood against the Sannin and won. He's what gave them their titles. A man that powerful wandering around the woods and training stray children was a stretch for Choji. "I can see the uncertainty in your face," Hanzo noted. "Come back to the hideout with us and you'll see just how many people I've managed to save so far. You'll see that it's not pain winning this war." Still dubious, but thankful for the save, Choji went along with him. As they walk, one of the kids falls back to walk with him. Most of the people we save from oppressors are skeletal, but you still have a little bit of meat on your bones, she observes, smiling at him. You must have been pretty resilient wherever you were before we found you. In a village controlled by pain, Choji explained. I hid my losing weight from them, and they never changed my shackles, so I slipped out from them and ran. That's pretty clever, even if it would take a while to pull off, she answers. My name's Kazuko. I've been with Hanzo for nearly 3 months now, and he saved me from pain as well. I had fallen and smacked my knee pretty hard, and instead of administering first aid, they sent me away. Where I ended up, there was a man with a strange, scorpion-like tail who killed us one at a time. Just as he got to me, Hanzo leapt from the shadows and disrupted the entire process. Face darkening, Choji finally got the confirmation about his suspicions, that the injured were being taken for execution. But now, aside from some rigorous training, Hanzo has given us absolute freedom. The slaves under Pain's control worshipped him too, Choji pointed out, peering ahead at the back of Hanzo's head. We're not slaves, Kazuko reassures Choji. We can't run free and frolic because Pain's oppressors are everywhere. For every slave that's held captive, the ones who learn to love their captors are chosen as oppressors to continue this circular control. Their hideout was essentially a hole in the ground. There was nothing to set it apart from its surroundings. It was only hidden by a bush and a small boulder, and nothing more. After climbing down the ladder and walking through a cramped tunnel for half a minute, they got to a door that opened up into an enormous underground cavern. Paths had been carved along the edges of the wall, for the center of the cavern reached deep and into dark places beyond what Choji could see. But where there was steady ground, there were lights and hovels carved from the rock and hundreds, no, thousands of people hustling and bustling about where it was safe to walk. Even down into the hole that seemed to stretch forever, there were further tiers of homes built from the rock. Laterally, the cavern stretched for miles, bending eventually and blocking Choji's vision from yet further reaches that these people had doubtlessly learned to live in. Maybe Hanzo was telling the truth. Maybe there was a real resistance here. The ceiling above this spot is ground reinforced by 100-year-old trees, Kazuko explains to Choji. The cavern is easily large enough to fit everyone we save. It's a miracle of hiding spots. Everyone here is trained in chakra, so it was easy for us to conquer the verticality of the caverns, she goes on, pulling Choji to follow after Hanzo. He'll want to know just how capable you are right away, to gauge how helpful you'll be to the cause. If you're not good enough, he'll put you to work here, but the jobs down here are perfectly reasonable, don't worry. Leading him away from the endless cavern, Hanzo brings the kids of the just-finished expedition into a large room away from the civilians. The walls here are scarred black with heavy gouges in some places. They clearly trained hard. I know you're likely starving and seeking a bed to sleep, Hanzo told him, but I always tell people that it's at your most desperate that your true strength shows. Choji was truly out of chakra. He knew he couldn't do much of anything when it came to a duel with Hanzo, of all people. He was handed a roughly made shuriken, with the balance off, and the edge sharper at certain spots instead of uniform along its length. But it was better than nothing. He would have to show off his talents without any chakra use at all. As Hanzo waved for him to attack, Choji feigned several hand seals, making absolute sure that he didn't unconsciously feed chakra into the jutsu. This alone raised an eyebrow on Hanzo. The seals made were horse, serpent, ram, monkey, boar, horse, tiger, a well-known combination needed for a basic fireball jutsu. But instead of stopping at range to launch it, Choji kept charging, holding the final seal as if to delay the jutsu. As he came up to Hanzo, within arm's reach, he filled his lungs to mime it, but Hanzo did not flinch. Abandoning the feint, Choji twisted and swiped the kunai towards Hanzo, who batted it away easily before sweeping a leg to topple Choji. "You're more tired than I thought, but your knowledge of seals means you're a ninja," Hanzo made the obvious observation. "You won't require any of my basic training. I'll move you right up to the advanced stuff." Choji was almost afraid of losing consciousness, afraid that he'd wake up shackled yet again. But it was not so. He awoke in a clean bed, warm and cozy enough that if he weren't in his situation, he'd want to just roll over and go back to sleep. Willing himself up, he exited the little room he was in, a room that was barely large enough to contain the bed, never mind anything else, and looked down the street the room opened out onto. None of these spaces had doors, and so he was shocked that the noise of people outside were not enough to wake him. Catching him by the hand, Kazuko appeared by his side before he could notice, pulling him to come eat with the others. Now fully rested, it was part of his Akamichi custom to stuff his face with as much as he could. However, perhaps from the year of enslavement and starvation, Choji found himself looking down at all the cooked food and not wanting any of it. He tried a sip of apple juice, but all that did was make him nauseous. "It happens to all of us," Kazuko told him, recognizing his predicament. "After going so long without food, it's challenging to justify looking at so much of it. I nearly hurled the first time I tried to eat after all that torture." "Yeah," Choji answered sickly. "I'll try again later." "Well, you'll definitely work up an appetite. Master Hanzo got really energetic after seeing your effort in the training room," Kazuko reassured Choji. "He's all gung-ho about increasing our training." Returning to the training room, the two of them walk in on Hanzo talking to a group of 30 kids about chakra control and producing various jutsu from it. "Their class is almost finished," Kazuko explains, pointing at the kids. "He won't do these basic classes with us. With us, it'll be sparring, and a lesson in Master Hanzo's ethics." "This is not who I envisioned Hanzo to be," Choji muttered, shaking his head almost comically about the strange sight before him. Life under Sage Payne's rule was stressful and horrifying. This was so close to normality that he forgot that they were actually underground. After a year of the bad, Choji couldn't help but remain suspicious about Hanzo's motives. As the younger kids left the room, Hanzo turned his full attention to Choji, inviting Kazuko to sit and watch. "Let me tell you a story, Choji," he started, adjusting his mask slightly. "When I was younger, I was willing to do absolutely anything to get stronger. It was a price I paid dearly for, but one that I would make again. Because ultimately, it's only the strongest that survive in this twisted world of ours, and my job has become training the newer generation so that they're all strong enough to hold their own against the evils of usurpers like Pain. Because even if we defeat him, eventually someone else will come along to serve the same role. I'm just one man. I used to portray myself as something more, but if this nation is to stand as one eventually, then I need to swallow such silly pride. Just as Pain will eventually be replaced by another, I too will be replaced, and the cycle will repeat until someone strong enough from among us can end this infighting. Choji, will you fight with me? Will you take the plunge for power and help our nation grow strong under one banner?" "I had to watch someone die by my own pride," Choji told him. "Because I am different from your average citizen. I am stronger. Call me soft, but I can't get past the idea that so many are being tortured even now, while I stand freed. Train me, Hanzo. Train me so that I can help you free this nation." "An eye for an eye," Hanzo nodded with a grin barely visible from behind his mask. "Take from him what he took from us. Freedom, peace, agency." Peering out from a line of bushes, Choji looked on with Kazuko by his side. She had insisted on going on all of his missions with him, and no one seemed to raise concern about it. Though she wasn't as capable as Choji, she was strong enough that he didn't have to worry about her. If she was jumped by one or two oppressors, she was able to fend them off quite well. By now, Choji had begun eating again, and his strength was returning as he was also getting stronger. It was an alien feeling that he was getting, as every morning he felt more refreshed than the day before it. Not to mention the guiding touch of his new best friend. Everything she said felt like an echo of his own thoughts. They were in complete sync with one another, without ever exerting any effort. After just a few months, he had even disclosed to her that he was from the Land of Fire, unable to keep that a secret any longer. But she was not bothered by the news even a little bit. She even asked if she could go along with him back home once their business here was done, and of course he agreed immediately. She was more grateful than ever that someone from a different nation was willing to risk their lives to such an extent just to help the less fortunate of another closed nation. Anything he thought was bad news, like that he was a leaf shinobi, she only ever seemed to interpret as positive. While she was around, he no longer needed to rely on the void within his mind to fend off fears and anxieties. Her presence was like a blanket of warmth for his mind. After moving from town to town and wreaking havoc, Choji and Kazuko finally came to the settlement that he actually recognized, the very settlement he had been enslaved within. Even in all this time away, many parts of it looked identical. The watchtower he had been set to building still stood unfinished, as if years of fighting had constantly undid its own progress. Now, more than ever, Hanzo's story that Pain was faking the attacks seemed oh so clearly true. No wonder that tower was never finished, it was just part of Pain's cycle of destruction, and building false hope in the slaves. Snarling at that confirmation, Choji quickly breathed away the frustration and glanced at Kazuko, nodding that it was time to take action, and signaling the structures he had been kept in when he was a slave here. Their general strategy was that Choji would stir up trouble by attacking the oppressors, while Kazuko would find and free all the slaves. Hanzo's implicit instructions was to kill as few people as possible, because even the oppressors were just indoctrinated former slaves. Leaping into action, Choji landed a swift fist into the side of a nearby guard, who screamed into Choji's hand, covering his mouth as he fell to the ground before a second strike knocked him out. Continuing on, Choji weaved several hand seals and conjured a great boulder launching overhead. Enlarging an arm and hand, he reached up to catch it before throwing it at the town center building, where he knew the oppressors generally resided. The attack wasn't to hurt them, but to seal them inside the building as the boulder smashed down right where the door was and blocked off their only easy exit. Signaling for Kazuko to start liberating the prisoner slaves, Choji kept a keen eye in every direction that he could to keep any other oppressors from raining on their parade. Just as it had gone with every other previous village, the oppressors were hopelessly outmatched against a trained ninja. Kazuko freed everyone they could find, and inside a 15-minute window, they had liberated more than 45 people. The problem this time was that the people fled aimlessly into the woods, instead of following Kazuko's clear instructions. Fleeing from sight themselves, Choji and Kazuko regrouped in the bushes and shared only few words about their plan of action. They already knew each other well enough that both wanted to seek out and retrieve the slaves. But neither of them were trackers, and traveling alone was dangerous. With woods this thick, they would only be able to save so many before losing track of the rest. Twigs snapping nearby alerted both of them to a possible eavesdropper. Standing in the open, Hanzo looked down at the two of them. "Master Hanzo?" Kazuko muttered, confused, just as Choji was. It had been nearly a year since they were cut loose from Hanzo's training to liberate separately from him. They still came across him in the hideout from time to time, but by and large they were no longer on each other's radars. "Choji, your heart needs to be hardened for what is to come," Hanzo said, his head crooked as he stared down at the Akamichi. Walking out from the woods behind him, the sage Pain emerged. "Master Hanzo, watch out!" Kazuko screamed, surging to her feet in an attempt to protect him. "Urgh!" Kazuko uttered, her momentum stopping outright as she folded in half and dropped to the ground. Straightening, Sage Pain reached over and wiped his bloodied hand on Hanzo's clothes to the latter's annoyance. "Kazuko!" Choji shouted, reaching for her, but finding his body had been half submerged into the ground, and he can't make any ground at all. Enlarging his body and shrinking it down in an instant, Choji forces a crater to form around him as he leaps free from the incapacitation and kneels beside Kazuko's body. Kneeling opposite him, Hanzo dispels his transformation jutsu, revealing himself as someone else with orange hair and a black cloak with red clouds. Hanzo is nothing but an illusion, he tells Choji, his voice has even changed now. A tool for our purposes to create the greatest soldiers. "Why are you telling me this?" Choji asked him through sadness and fury, unable to control either. "The land of rain has been spat upon by all, including the gods," the man explains, pointing up at the rain constantly falling. "There was never any question who was in charge here. I am in charge. Pain is a figurehead for our needs. We had to weed out the frail, the old, the weak, so that all else could be trained into worthy soldiers, ready to follow the will of Yahiko, the savior who defeats both Hanzo and Pain. Only the strongest survive the law of the jungle," Pain explained. "Out from the ashes of this illusion, we will have an army that can tear down any supposedly great nation. You spit on us, we spit on you." "But why me?" Choji cried, looking up at possibly the two scariest people he would ever lay eyes on. "You're from the Leaf," Pain says. "I recognized you, remember? Go tell your little Hokage about us. The time has come," Yahiko told him. "Be our messenger, and bring on the drums of war." "It's poetic in a way," Pain chuckled. "We were trained by a leaf ninja when we were kids, the very leaf that rampaged through our nation without a thought of the damage they were inflicting on us. And now we've trained you with every intention to flatten the leaf. Everything finds its balance eventually. Our master was too gullible to give us this last lesson," Yahiko told Choji, nodding at Kazuko's body. "If you've never lost anything, how can you know what to fight for?" "Now run, coward," Pain encouraged, picking Choji up and thrusting him away. "Run away to the village hidden in the leaves, and tell them that the war never ended." Hearing raised voices coming out of her own office, Tsunade increased the haste to her door. When she looked through it, she saw Minato furiously scribbling into his journal, muttering unintelligibly as he did so. "Minato?" Tsunade asks through the darkness, but he ignores her completely. Stepping inside the office and loudly shutting her door gets his attention, but he reacts by picking up the book and slamming it back down onto her desk, surprising her. "What it is?" Minato asks loudly, raising his arms in disbelief, as if she should know what he's talking about. What is?" Tsunade asks carefully. Furiously rubbing his hair, Minato tells her to look around her for once in her life before walking past her and kicking open her door. As he stomps down the hospital's halls, she hurries after him, hoping that she wouldn't have to step in if he caused a scene. Even for his more erratic mood swings lately, she never had seen him lash out like that before. Getting to Jiraiya's room, he throws the door open and marches in. A nearby nurse notices the commotion, but Tsunade tells her to seek out Shizune and Kabuto and bring them here. Walking to Jiraiya's side, Minato looked down at him before slapping him several times. Blinking blearily awake, Jiraiya looks around blindly. Having not used his eyes for a few years, he was quick to tire and slow to recognition. He had only been brought out of his coma a day ago, so this was needless stress on him. "Jiraiya!" Minato yelled at him, though Tsunade was sure Jiraiya had no idea what was going on, even if it was his name being yelled. Closing the door and quickly coming to Jiraiya's other side, Tsunade attempts to get Minato's attention, though it's solely focused on his former master. Why the hell was some child able to cure you? What jutsu was it? Jiraiya's reddened cheeks from the slapping are the only indication that he had ever been bothered, as he had quickly fallen asleep all over again. Leave him alone, Minato! Tsunade intervenes as the Hokage attempts to slap Jiraiya again. Catching her hand, Minato breaks eye contact and looks at her. The fury on his face is unlike anything she's ever seen from him. You will stay out of my way, or face my wrath. Even the night that Kushina passed away did not produce such vitriol from him. But in just moments, Minato's fury melted away to horrified shock as he seemed to finally realize what he was doing. I don't... Minato muttered, stupefied by his own performance. Tsunade, I apologize. Minato, Tsunade mutters, afraid for the still young Hokage. Master, Minato continues, looking down at Jiraiya's sleeping face and gently touching the redness. I can't believe Minato, Tsunade tries again to get his attention. This shame will be eternal, Minato mutters with abhorrent self-disgust before flashing away. Oof. I mean, how intense was that? Does Tsunade know everything that's going on with him? Does he know what's going on with himself? And what about Choji? Did he actually find conclusive proof about the supposed plot? At long last, maybe the direct approach was actually the better one. And the flashback? Perhaps that's shed the remaining light on what's going on in the Land of Rain. Of course, their motive is deranged, but to think Choji was duped twice by the same people, only to return home and have one of his oldest friends lie to him as well. I wonder if he'll ever be able to trust anyone after this. With Rock Lee all but confirming the insanity that might be this scheme, I don't know how Choji can really trust anything anymore. But Minato's explosion at the end there would certainly add some kind of validity to wanting to off him if he's so unstable as to create such bedlam in a hospital of all places. And I wonder what kind of training Hanzo, or I guess Yahiko, gave Choji. Would he have done just as much for Choji as Jiraiya did for him when he was younger? I wonder how that ends up panning out. But that fearlessness of sending Choji back to the Leaf in one piece says their own little declaration of war. Surely Choji's shared this information with someone already, and if so, why hasn't anyone done anything about the implication yet? Lots to think about, I think. Talking about the time I took off, I didn't really do anything at all for the rewrite. I actually just needed to step away and be unfettered for a little while. I think that caused me to return with a bit of a fervor and excitement for continuing this rewrite. We may still be a ways off from the conclusion, but I'm having fun right where we are. This time skip arc is culminating just as planned, and I don't intend on slowing down anytime soon. And it's no secret that we've only been looking at Konoha's defenders. Kiba, Shikamaru, Shino, Neji, and Choji so far are all on the same quote-unquote team, if you will. Soon we'll be getting to the other team and what's actually going on. Are they actually planning to off the Hokage? If not, then what else could they be doing that would require such secrecy? And someone fixed Jiraiya. How? When? Who? I wonder when Hanzo was actually offed. So many questions. And that's the perfect cue to tip my hat and bow out of this one. The sky's the limit.